following is an example of negative feedback. So just to review, negative feedback, negative versus positive feedback. So the overall idea of these feedback loops or these feedback systems, which have to do with usually the release of hormones, if we're increasing or decreasing, and for what reason. So for negative feedback, you want to think of the phrase more leads to less. And for positive, you want to think of the phrase more leads to more. More to more. So starting with the negative feedback loop, the whole idea of the negative feedback loop is to bring everything to balance, bring to homeostasis. So balance or homeostasis. So the whole idea is that if something is out of the ordinary, the body wants to bring it back to baseline, to stability. So if, let's say, your blood glucose is high, so you have an elevated blood glucose, or your temperature is high, then your body will work to bring you back down to baseline. So that's why after you go for a run, if you're sweating a lot, you feel hot, you will start to sweat to bring that temperature down so you can cool down and get back to baseline. If your blood sugar is high, the body will secrete more insulin to help bring it back to baseline. So the whole idea with this negative loop is bring back to baseline. So baseline, negative feedback loop. However, with the positive feedback loop, it's actually the opposite of balance and homeostasis. It's actually more of something abnormal, more and abnormal, so we're not balanced. We're doing some sort of specific task, but we're doing it for a reason and we're doing it temporarily. So examples could be that if there's more uterine contractions during childbirth, that's something that normally in a calm, balanced homeostasis state, somebody shouldn't be contracting going into labor every minute of the day, but in that specific instance, it's something that's needed. So in this instance, it could be contractions for labor. Same thing with stimulation for breast milk secretion. So breast milk, that's not something that's normally in your homeostasis state. If you weren't nursing or in a position where you needed to produce breast milk to feed a baby, then that's not something your body should normally be producing. But for the positive feedback loop, because it's something a little bit out of the ordinary, more leading to more, that would be an example of positive feedback. Another example with the more leading to more as opposed to the abnormal is if we look at this example here with the sodium influx Hodgkin cycle. This is an example of more to more because this is an example of how action potentials work for sending messages between neurons, as we learned about in the neural section. And this would be a positive feedback because it's creating more and more sodium to create these neurotransmission signals. So now we know that this is an example of a positive feedback loop, and therefore we can eliminate option C. Now let's look at the other examples and see if they would relate to negative or positive feedback. The milk ejection reflex example is what we discussed here with why breast milk is needed, how this is an abnormal situation. And when we say abnormal, just meaning it's not something where the body's at balance, at homeostasis, at rest. It's an extra activity that's occurring for a specific circumstance. So this would be an example of a positive feedback loop, but we're looking for negative in this example, so we'll eliminate it. Parturition reflex, this is going back to the description of contractions going into labor, which is what we discussed for positive feedback. So we can eliminate that. That's positive feedback. We're looking for negative feedback. And option D says thermoregulatory reflex. And this is correct. This is what we discussed up here when we said about if your temperature gets high, the body wants to regulate to bring down to balance and homeostasis by secreting sweat or hormones to bring down the temperature. So then you're back into balance. So option D, thermoregulatory reflex, is correct.